If you turn your Bibles to Exodus, we'll start in Exodus 3. We'll start in Exodus 3. Originally I was going to be preaching on joy. That quickly turned into overcoming fear, which is quite ironic because preaching terrifies me and I'm already terrified to be up here. So this is probably mostly for me as I went through it, and it definitely helped. Yes, we'll start reading in Exodus 3, 7 to 14 to begin with. Exodus 3, 7. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people, which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land, unto a good land and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come up unto me, and I have also seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppress them. Come, now therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. And Moses said unto God, Who am I that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, Certainly I will be with thee, and this shall be a token unto thee, that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, ye shall serve God upon this mountain. And Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, The God of your fathers hath sent me unto you. And they shall say to me, What is his name? And what shall I say unto them? And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. And 15. And God said moreover unto Moses, shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, The Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, hath sent me unto you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial unto all generations. And if you go over to Exodus chapter 4, we'll read from verse 1 to 18 as well here. And Moses answered and said, But behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice, for they will say, The Lord hath not appeared unto thee. And the Lord said unto him, What is that in thine hand? And he said, A rod. And he said, Cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses fled before it. And the Lord said unto Moses, Put forth thine hand, and take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand, and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord God of thy fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, hath appeared unto thee. And the Lord said furthermore unto him, Put now thine hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. And he said, Put thine hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again, and plucked it out of his bosom, and behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. And it shall come to pass, if they will not believe thee, neither hearken to the voice of the first sign, that they will believe the voice of the latter sign. And it shall come to pass, if they will not believe also these two signs, neither hearken unto thy voice, that thou shalt take of the water of the river, and pour it upon the dry land, and the water which thou takest out of the river shall become blood upon the dry land. And Moses said unto the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither heretofore, nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant, but I am of slow speech and of a slow tongue. And the Lord said unto him, Who hath made man's mouth, or who maketh the dumb, or deaf, or the seeing, or the blind? Have not I the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say. And he said, O my Lord, send, I pray thee, by the hand of him whom thou wilt send. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, Is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? I know that he can speak well. And also, behold, he cometh forth to meet thee, and when he seeth thee, he will be glad in his heart. And thou shalt speak unto him, and put words in his mouth, and I will be with thy mouth, and with his mouth, and will teach you what ye shall do. And he shall be thy spokesman unto the people, and he shall be to thee instead of a mouth. And thou shalt be to him instead of God. And thou shalt take this rod in thine hand, wherewith thou shalt do signs. And Moses went and returned to Jethro his father-in-law, and said unto him, Let me go, I pray thee, and return unto my brethren which are in Egypt, and see whether they be yet alive. And Jethro said, Go to Moses, go in peace. Let's just pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for this night. Pray that you would calm my nerves and bless the reading of your word. Lord, I pray that you would help me to bring something out that will be useful to someone tonight. I pray that you will be glorified through this message. I pray this in your name. Amen. I see that Moses is a good example of someone who is filled with fear of service. But not only is he a good example of someone filled with fear of service, but he's also a good example of someone overcoming that fear of service. Not through his own strength and his own courage, but through God. Firstly, I would just like to point out some character traits of Moses, or some things about him. Even though he had an extraordinary upbringing, he was brought into the house of Pharaoh and was raised an Egyptian. By the time he was called to serve, he was an ordinary man. He had lived as a shepherd for 40 years, just working a normal job. He had a sinful past, and no doubt he had regrets and mistakes that he can't get away from. It's just part of you. And that's the same character that we as Christians have. We have a sinful past, we have regrets, and we're working normal jobs. But that doesn't mean that we can't be used of God the same way that God used Moses. And looking further into Moses' fears, we'll go through a few of them tonight. The first one being, I believe it's Moses' fear of being unworthy, back in Exodus 3, verse 11. Chapter 3, verse 11. And Moses said unto God, Who am I that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? Moses was an incredibly humble man, so there's an aspect of that in there as well, that he honestly believed that he was not anything special. And that is true with everyone. We're not special. It's what God gives us and what God can do through us that makes us special. But Moses' fear was that he wasn't worthy or not able to, or unqualified to serve in the way he'd been called. Interestingly enough, it's John the Baptist also, not quite the same way, but he also had a feeling of unworthiness when Jesus called to serve in a certain way. If you'd like to flip over to Matthew 3, verses 13 to 15. Matthew 3, 13 to 15. It says, Then cometh Jesus from Galilee to Jordan unto John, to be baptized of him. But John forbade him, saying, I have need to be baptized of thee. Comest thou to me? And Jesus answering said unto him, Suffer it be so now, for thus it becometh us to fulfill all righteousness. Then he suffered him. So often we see things where we believe that we shouldn't be serving in that way, but God has called us to serve that way. And it's overcoming that fear of being unworthy that's important. And he wasn't the only one. Paul said that he was the least of the apostles. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 9 to 11. Paul said, For I am the least of the apostles, that am not meet to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God I am what I am, and this grace which was bestowed upon me was not in vain, but I laboured more abundantly than they all. Yet not I, but the grace of God which was in me. Therewith, whether it were I or they, so we preached, and so ye believed. And it was true. Paul persecuted the church, and by man's standards, he would be unworthy to be an apostle. Thank God we don't run by man's standards, we run on God's standards. There's a saying I'm quite fond of. It goes, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the call. Unfortunately, this fear stops many from serving God. And when we look at it, it's a rational fear, but it's an irrational thing to continue in, considering we have the Word of God showing us so many times that others have had that same fear, but God has told them that they were to serve that way. We then see God's response to Moses in Exodus 3:12. Exodus 3:12, and he said, Certainly I will be with thee, and this shall be a token unto thee, that I have sent thee when thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt. Ye shall serve God upon this mountain. That should have been enough for Moses to move forwards, but he did allow that fear to continue stopping him from serving. And then he brings in his second fear, the fear of the unknown, which is verse 13. And Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, The God of your fathers hath sent me unto you. And when they shall say to me, What is his name? What shall I say unto them? Moses was afraid of unknown questions. He didn't know how to answer it. What is his name seems like a strange question to ask, that the Israelites would ask, considering they had obviously knew who God was and they were crying out to him. God was answering their cry. And more than likely it was that the Jews would have asked this question to see if Moses knew what he was talking about, if it was Moses' knowledge. And Moses had been away from his people for 40 years. So he'd not been around, he'd not been in the culture for 40 years. It's a very rational fear, again, to have a feeling that you may not know things about the culture. God's response to this in Exodus 3, verse 14 and 15, was, And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. And God said moreover unto Moses, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, The Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, hath sent me unto you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial unto all generations. His fear of the Jewish culture moving on without him didn't exist. God is forever, is going to have those names forever. And it's a fear that we often have, and not being able to answer questions, and it's a fear we face when we go on the street. And we preach, we have that fear that someone will ask us a question we don't know. The truth is God has already given us the answers we need. And we have the Bible. 2 Timothy 3:16 says, All Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness. So often we neglect the Bible, and that's one of the reasons why we don't know what to say. But if we were to read the Bible, it's in your mind that when someone asks you a question, you can't necessarily call it up on command, but when you're talking to someone and they have a question, the Holy Spirit brings that to mind and gives you the answer. That's probably the most important thing to remember, that if you know the Word, you know how to answer. It has an answer for every question anyone can ask you. Then moving on to past that, Moses' fear of unbelief in Exodus 4, verse 1. And Moses answered and said, But behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice, for they will say, The Lord hath not appeared unto thee. Moses was literally talking to God through a burning bush, and he was still afraid. Often I think we look at Moses and not quite understand how he could be afraid that the Israelites wouldn't believe him. That God had already said previously that I'll be with you. That fear of unbelief, it was just stopping him. But we do the same thing. We don't have a burning bush, but we have the Bible. And yet we are so often afraid to serve where we've been called. If God calls us to serve somewhere, he will provide the way forward. The same way he gave Moses these miracles to prove that God sent him. The answer that God gave was in verses 2 and onwards. And the Lord said unto him, What is that in thine hand? He said, A rod. And he said, Cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses fled before it. And the Lord said unto Moses, Put forth thine hand, and take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand, caught it, and it became a rod in his hand. that they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, hath appeared unto thee. And the Lord said furthermore unto him, Put now thine hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. And he said, Put thine hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again, plucked it out of his bosom, and behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. And it shall come to pass, if they will not believe thee, neither hearken to the voice of the first sign, that they will believe the voice of the latter sign. And it shall come to pass, if they will not believe these two signs, neither hearken unto thy voice, that thou shalt take of the water of the river, pour it on dry land, and the water which thou takest out of the river shall become blood upon the dry land. We don't have those miracles that we can show people today, but the Bible shows his miracles, and that's what we've been given. Something that we quite often confuse is that we're the ones who have to try to convince someone to believe. And it's not our job to convince, it's our job to tell, to show. And then it's up to God to convince. If you want to go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 3. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 6 to 8 says, I have planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So then neither is he that planteth anything, neither he that watereth, but God that giveth the increase. And now he that planteth and he that watereth are one, and every man shall receive his own reward according to his own labour. I think it is one of the biggest issues we have. Often, I know personally myself, I get dragged into arguments or debates when on the street talking to people, and that's not important. We're not supposed to be trying to convince them by our own words and our own ability to twist things and make them seem a certain way. Our responsibility is to present the gospel, and God will convince them. That being said, we need to know the gospel, and we need to know how to answer questions, not in a way to be debating or twisting, but just in a way to show them what God has said. And fourthly, see here Moses' fear of public speaking in Exodus 4:10. And Moses said unto the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither heretofore, nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant, but I am of slow speech and of a slow tongue. This one hits home with me quite a lot. I am not eloquent. I don't speak well. I think many people face this fear of not being able to speak well, especially when in a situation like this where you're standing in front of everyone and preaching. It makes me very uncomfortable. I think Moses probably felt fear of not being understood, potentially a fear of being mocked. It says that he was of slow speech and a slow tongue. According to Hebrew tradition, Moses had a speech impediment. He wasn't able to pronounce certain sounds. And anyone who's had any kind of issue speaking or anything like that has more than likely suffered mockery. It's kind of in human nature to make fun of people who are struggling with something. It's sad, but it is true. I think there's also a fear of being seen as unintelligent, which is quite funny because I thought it was very ironic when I was writing my notes. I was writing it through, and then I was sitting there and I struggled on unintelligent. I couldn't spell it for 2 minutes. I'm sitting there and I'm trying to go back forwards, and I'm like, oh wow, that is so ironic. I have to use a little spell check, and I'm like, oh, there we go. So yeah, I'm not intelligent. If you'd known me for more than half an hour, you can figure that out yourself. But God's response is in Exodus 4:11 and 12. And the Lord said unto him, Who hath made man's mouth? Or who maketh the dumb, or deaf, or the seeing, or the blind? Have not I the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say. It should have been enough for Moses at that point that God had promised that he would go with him and be to help him with his speech. And it should be enough for us. In John 14, verse 26, it says, "But the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, whom the Father will send in my name, he shall teach you all things, and bring all things to your remembrance whatsoever I have said unto you." I think so easily we forget that when we go out in the street, we're not going alone. God has come with us. He's in us always. And I think we fall into that trap of thinking we are alone when we're preaching the gospel. Even though we might publicly say, "Oh, we're going out with God," there might be that fear in the back of the mind saying that you're alone. And the truth of it is you're not. We're not. 1 Corinthians 2, 1 to 5. I should have got you put a bookmark in 1 Corinthians as well. 1 Corinthians 2, 1 to 5. Paul also stated that he could not speak well. 1 Corinthians 2, 1 to 5. "But I determined this with myself, that I would not come again to you in heaviness. For if I make you sorry, who is..." I'm in the reading wrong chapter. I was going, that's not making sense at all. Yes, 1 Corinthians 2, 1 to 5. "And I, brethren, when I came to you, came not with excellency of speech or of wisdom, declaring unto you the testimony of God. For I determined not to know any thing among you, save Jesus Christ and him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and in fear and with much trembling, and my speech and preaching was not with enticing words of man's wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power." That goes back to what I was saying before as well, that it's not our job to convince someone to be a Christian. It's just our job to tell his power, and God will give the increase. Then moving on to Exodus 4:13. "And he said, O my Lord, send, I pray thee, by the hand of him whom thou wilt send." There are two possible meanings to this verse, and it's kind of, people go backwards and forwards over it. The first possible meaning is Moses was begrudgingly accepting to go as commanded. One of the things pointing towards this is that Moses did not bring up any further excuses past this point. What I would say is against it, but also for it, depending on how you look at it, is verse 14. "And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, Is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? I know that he can speak well. And also, behold, he cometh forth to meet thee, and when he seeth thee, he will be glad in his heart." Some believe that God may have been angered by his unwillingness to accept, but he still accepted, and it was a way to just move it forward, giving him Aaron. The other way of looking at this verse is that it was Moses' last-ditch plea that God would send someone else. I personally lean more to that understanding of the verse. God's anger at Moses' continued resistance to serve, and then sending Aaron to Moses is the last nail in the coffin of Moses' excuse of not being able to speak. And this is God's response to verse 13. "And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, Is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? I know that he can speak well. And also, behold, he cometh forth to meet thee, and when he seeth thee, he will be glad in his heart. And thou shalt speak unto him, and put words in his mouth, and I will be with thy mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you what ye shall do. And he shall be thy spokesman unto the people, and he shall be even he shall be to thee instead of a mouth, and thou shalt be to him instead of God." At this point, Moses had finally submitted to serve God. Now, I'm sure that he had still had these fears in the back of his mind, even though God had provided a way forwards through each of these fears. I believe he still would have had those fears. And it's important to note that it's not through his own courage, but God's provision and support that allowed him to move forward and to serve. If we try to do any work for God in our own strength or courage, it will fail. If God's not in it, it will fail. this moves on to the last thing I see, is that all these fears weren't Moses' true fear. I believe that there was a fear of rejection was encompassed all of these other fears and excuses. If we read in Exodus 2:11 and 11 to 15, Exodus 2:11 to 15. And it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens, and he spied an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren. And he looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together. And he said to him that did the wrong, Wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? And he said, Who made thee a prince and judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killedst the Egyptian? And Moses feared and said, Surely this thing is known. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Moses had been rejected by his people 40 years prior to being sent back. And the last time he tried to help his brethren, it caused him much sorrow. He put his life on the line for one of his brethren, and it would appear that someone spoke. Someone talked about it. This could easily be a reason for fear of rejection. It's interesting when I was reading through this that I had always had the viewpoint or the assumption that Moses had done wrong and that he committed murder when he killed the Egyptian. But Acts 7, verse 23 to 28. Acts 7, 23 to 28. And says, And when he was full 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brethren, the children of Israel. This is speaking of Moses. And seeing one of them suffer wrong, he defended him and avenged him that was oppressed, and smote the Egyptian. For he supposed his brethren would have understood how that God by his hand would deliver them. But they understood not. And the next day he showed himself unto them as they strove, and would have set them at one again, saying, Sirs, ye are brethren, why do ye wrong one to another? But he that did his neighbour wrong thrust him away, saying, Who made thee a ruler and judge over us? Wilt thou kill me as thou didst the Egyptian yesterday? And then Moses fled, as the saying was, and was a stranger in the land of Midian, where he begat 2 sons. Reading that through again, it paints the whole situation in a different picture, and that it was a positive thing, that he was defending his brethren, and that he had been sent to save them, but his brethren didn't understand that. It paints a bit of a different picture of Moses, in that even when he was young, even after spending all of his life raised in Pharaoh's house, in no doubt luxury and freedom and joy, earthly joy, he still chose God and his people. The betrayal of his own people in talking about it sent him to Midian, sent him into a strange land. If that had happened to me, I would think that would be a betrayal, and I would be fearful of going back to these people again, and saying that you're here to save them, that God sent you to lead them out. No doubt there may have been people who still remembered him. There could be a fear of his past there as well. And Moses fears it's a rational fear. And we face the same rational fears, not the same as that, obviously. None of us, not that I'm aware of, have killed someone and then come back. But we face many of these fears, and in the human mind, it's very rational. But what is not rational is giving into this fear. Because we have the Bible. Isaiah 41 verse 10 says, "Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed. For I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness." 1 Peter 5 verse 7 says, "Casting all your care upon him, for he careth for you." John 16 verse 33, "These things have I spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." I believe we're always going to have fear of service in our lives. We're always going to have tribulation in our service. If you try to do anything for the Lord, the devil will fight against it. But we can be of good cheer. Jesus has overcome the world. That is all I have for tonight. I'll just close us in prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for this night. I pray that there's been a help to someone. I know that it was a help to me studying through it. I pray that you would help us to move forwards without fear and move forwards for you wherever you called us to serve, Lord. We just want to thank you for your grace, your mercy, and your love and kindness, Lord. I pray this in your name. Amen. Dismissed.